The company itself was founded out of the German Industrial Revolution in 1838. You see that date behind us. And as several people pointed out, they were very late to the party in terms of fountain pens. For the first, 90 years of their existence, they produced aniline dyes, which is sort of what Germany pioneered in the Industrial Revolution. They produced other pigments, they produced inks, they produced office supplies. Only in 1929 did they begin, they could not have chosen a worse year to produce fountain pens. But they had one thing going for them, and that was the piston filler. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And within 5 years, the piston filler would revolutionize at least European pen making. It would take over from the old safety pens. In the United States, various other fillers, most notably the lever, persisted for quite a while. But in Europe, it became mostly about the piston filler. And that enabled them to go ahead and become successful in making pens, which they have done with a few bumps and hiccups to this day. In the 1970s, like most pen companies, they were in dire straits. At one point during the late 70s, they were making children's sandcastle pale beach sets and copying machines that didn't work. That's what it came down to before they failed in 1982, went into receivership, were taken over by a Swiss an investment banking house, which sold them to a Malaysian holding company, which has owned the company since 1984. And as someone who is devoted to Pelikans old and new, I have to say that you could not ask for a better steward of that company than those folks have been. The manufacture is still in Germany. The basic decisions are still made in Germany. And I at least think the quality is still everything that it ever was. Thus endeth the first sermon. What I'm mostly going to spend time doing tonight is showing people sort of through a little chronological, again, remember I'm a historian here, a little chronological array of Pelikans that I brought that some of you might not ever have seen before. And so you start at the beginning, and that's with a black German pen. This is the Pelikan. It doesn't have a number. The number would come later. If you're only making one pen. When I first started doing Pelikans, some of you know the name Regina Martini. She is a legendary pen collector, dealer. She said to me, well, this is nice that you're doing Pelikans because there's just one model. You can collect a Pelikan and then go back to your Parkers. Well, I still have some Parkers, but Pelikans have taken over my life. So this is the original one. It's, to my eye, it is maybe the most elegant pen design ever. It is pure German modernism. I mean, sometimes called Bauhaus. It's nothing on this pen is not functional. Every single piece, if we had more time, I would literally take one of these apart for you and explain to you the rationale behind every bit and every inch of the design. German pens are black. Okay? That's it. For whatever reason, Fritz Beindorf, who was the son-in-law of Gunther Wagner, made a smart move, went to work for the company, married the boss's daughter. Got to run the company. He liked green. So actually the green was the first. I sort of reversed. I need to reverse order here. Because the green was the first. The black was hedging their bets. He went with green. And the first few years there are a wonderful array of greens. This is my favorite. This kind of blue-green. I'll leave these out for y'all to.
They all still work, right?
Huh?
They all still work.
Some of these may have a little bit dry cork, so I'll have to pipette them up. But yeah, everything on this tray theoretically works.
They're not disposable items.
I think I can say safely that I have written with almost every pen in this tray. I'm a user. I'm not a collector. Well, Pelikan realized that perhaps their design was a little bit too stark. And I chose a bad example because this is brass. But in 1930, they put 2 bands on the cap just to break that line. Personally, I like this better. I think it's cleaner. But so be it. And actually, one of my favorite parlor tricks when I'm among geeks is to take a pen like the 100 you showed me, John, and date it within months. Because you can do that with the early pens. Because they were doing rolling incremental improvements. So I can look at this pen, for example, and say, well, this is an early 1930. Okay, before July of 1930. They softened the design a little bit further. In 31 and 32, they tapered the cap. See what I mean by incremental design? Okay, and you're still doing green and black. You know, that's it, folks. Well, they were successful, though. So they began introducing, starting in 1931, some fancier models, notwithstanding the Depression, which was far worse in Germany because of reparations after World War I than it was almost anywhere else. But they were able to bring along some additional models. The 110, most folks think it's a nice chrome pen or maybe silver. It's actually white gold. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. This one's been in my hands for many times. I just adore this pen, and I like it even better because, to answer Barb's question earlier, this pen was owned by a left-hander. How do I know that? Because Dr. M.H. Talon, I think is his name, put his monogram on the pen in a way that he could see it when he wrote with his left hand. And I'm left-handed, so this one's mine. This one don't get sold, nothing else. Later on, they would introduce the 111. This is with a gold band. Just a simple, these things are not, what these are is bands on top of a shaft in German, the barrel. So this has a gold band. The 112 is solid gold, cap and barrel. And then you get to the iconic Pelikan, the 111T, the so-called Toledo. Yeah. And this one isn't the crown prince of my collection. I didn't bring it. And in fact, I didn't bring it. I did bring some of the short cap tops. There's a short cap top version that I'll explain in a moment. And there are, as far as we know, 5 of the short cap top Toledos. And I got one. They also did produce colors. Most people aren't aware of that. They didn't sell them in Germany. Green was as far out as they were going to go. But they did this lovely gelb, yellow, or honey, as Gary Leary calls them, a red, same marble, a blue, same marble. And then we get to what I actually want to talk about tonight, mostly because it's my favorite. And that's the 101. Okay, the Pelikan 100, this guy here, is designated such because it has the celluloid band and hard rubber, later plastic cap. Okay, and that denotes a 100. If it has an all celluloid, and so here you see also a 100, very uncommon pen, in tortoise with red hard rubber. It's still a 100 because it's got that red hard rubber cap. And then the short cap top, and this is there's just a wonderful story behind this short cap top, and you can see it here alongside the more prominent one that sticks right up out of your pocket so you can grab it real easily. These, they said, were made for Latin countries, Italy, Spain, because they have pickpockets there. And the pickpocket will grab your pen. But this makes it harder. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know. There's also the question, I didn't bring any pencils. There's also the question of why pencils don't have erasers. And the given story, true or not, is that women use pencils and women don't make mistakes. That can cover it, guys. So these are 100s, though, because they've got the hard rubber caps and the celluloid barrel bands for decoration. Then we get to my favorites, at least this week. The 101. The Pelikan 101 has the same color barrel band and cap. Okay, so that's the 101. And there are exactly 10 different models. Well, no, you could say that there are 12, maybe. But there are 10 different models of these. They came in coral with the regular cap top, and God bless it, the short cap top. This one came to me from a client who had it. No, actually, it's this one. Never mind, I'm lying. So, 101 in coral, 101 in lizard. Yeah. And this is the one, actually, I think that came to me from a client. Yeah. In tortoise, of course, and those of you who were here last year know that I've got a serious problem with tortoise. Client once asked me how many I had, so I got curious and I counted. And at that time, it was 50. I've gotten a few more since then. But again, the 101 in, and you see another variation, so much for Regina's, one model. Infinite variations. The darker tortoise and the lighter tortoise. Production variation, and then the shame of my collection, the jade. I do not have the short cap top. I know where one is. And I've got to pry it loose before I die. But I do not have the short cap top. And then the lapis.
Yes.
And again, I do not have the short cap top. And Mackenzie has that one too, and I've got to get it.
Rick, got a question for you briefly. In all these variations, these are variations of design, externally cosmetic. Are they all the same, roughly the same internally?
They are all identical internally. I mean, if we had more time, I could go through the evolution of the filling system. It did change. It went from cork to synthetic and various other forms of synthetic. But all these pens that I've discussed so far, any part from one would, in theory, you got to account for shrinkage and that sort of thing. In theory, would fit in the other.
Okay, what about the nibs? I mean, are the nibs, the nib itself, are they, other than size, are they roughly the same? Are they,
yeah, they are.
Lots of variations?
They are identical. Again, there were production variations. Up until 1934, the nibs were produced actually by Montblanc. And those are some exquisite nibs. And then in 34, Pelikan began producing their own. And they're every bit as good, but there's something about those slim-shouldered nibs that just kind of at least get me going, as you can tell. So, these are the core of my collection. As I said, there are 10 possible variants. I have 8. I really lust for the other 2, and I've just got to shake the right trees to get them loose and not tell my wife. what I want to do with we've got a couple minutes remaining. What I want to do with the time remaining, at least to me, is just trace the further evolution of the pen. The 100, it became called the 100 in 1931 when they introduced this and went, oh, we need numbers now. So they sort of retroactively called these 100s and then went 110, 111, 112, and went on. And they produced these all the way through 1944 when the factory closed down for reasons obvious. But they were always developing and innovating. This is a really interesting variant, the so-called Magnum. And interestingly enough, when I first started collecting these things about 20 years ago, the received wisdom that these were made for the Spanish market only. Special request by the Spanish distributor. Well, it turns out not to have been the case. These were a transitional model. By 1935, they were under pressure to make bigger pens. This looks like a really small pen. My wife tells a story that when before using these, some of you are familiar with the Parker Vacuumatics Maxima. It's a big pen, and that's what I used. And I got this, and my wife said, when I first got it, she went, well, what the hell's he going to do with that? But, as Pelikan advertised, small in the pocket, big in the hand. It's bigger than it seems sometimes, but they were under pressure both to streamline and to enlarge. So this was their first cut in 1935, and they test marketed it in Spain and in Portugal, and for whatever reasons, that isn't the direction they went. A year later, 2 years later, in 1937, they came out with the Pelikan 100N. The innovative nomenclature was N, Neues, new. Okay, so this was the Pelikan 100N. It's a little bit bigger, it's a bit fatter, it's a little bit longer, it holds marginally more ink. And to go back to Glenn's question, it's remarkably similar inside to, in fact, the first 100Ns were identical, and then they began changing and swapping. So the 100N, just for fun, you can't really see this one, but it's transparent barrel. As far as we can tell, these were made only in Argentina, as the Beatles once said, Argentina. And then this model, the 100N, was introduced, as I said, in 37. It stopped, of course, in 44, when everything stopped. It resumed in 47, when the Marshall Plan began rebuilding the German economy, and continued all the way until probably 1954. Not quite sure. But in 1950, for those of you who are fashionistas, you're aware that Coco Chanel changed the fashion world with her new look, and everything had to be redesigned. And so this was Pelikan's answer. A lot of you will find it familiar, this 1950 pen, because it looks just like a Pelikan 400 today. Okay, so that came out in 1950. With some variations. This one is kind of fun because rather than the black, you can't tell in this room, but this is dark green, a real uncommon variation. And of course, they got cute with these. Gold fill. Solid gold cap. This, by the way, was the 520, just if you want the nomenclature. This was the 600. The 500 had a gold filled cap. This is a solid gold cap and bottom. The 700. Then came the 400N. Again, Germans don't like changing stuff. I mean, the other bit of German technology I like is their cars, BMWs specifically. And I had a 1970 BMW, and I spent a lot of time under it, not because it broke a lot, but because I liked doing my own stuff. And then I didn't have one for a while, and then in 2000 I got another BMW. And I walk into the kitchen one day with the oil drain plug in my hand, looking at my wife who doesn't care for pens or cars, and go, look at this, look at this. She goes, what? I go, the oil drain plug. It's the same. 30 years later, it's the same. You know, Germans don't like changing. So when they were forced to change in 1956, they came out with the 400N. Now put this 400N up to the 400, and what do you see? Essentially the same pen. So
What
they.
is different?
It is
And
different.
what is different?
What is different? The cap is a couple of millimeters longer. It's a little bit more tapered at the bottom, and the turning knob is more rounded.
What about,
And the internals are the same.
is this the time for the question about the number of birds and chicks? And
No.
No, okay.
I'll try and wrap this up real quick, but this is fun for me. So, forced to, Pelikan then developed the 400NN. Right, what does that stand for? You got it. And that one you can see some differences. It's much more tapered, it's much more domed at either end. So the NN. And then just real quickly, some fun oddities. Again, this is an example of us learning while we collect. For years and years, this was known as the Pelkan Manor, Maenner, supposedly after the jewelers in Stuttgart who, under authorization, made this fully gold-clad version. And then about 4 years ago, I think it was Tom Westrick, some of you know the name, did some research and said it wasn't Manor, it was Lauer. So now we call them Lauers. But they're lovely, elegant, gorgeous pens. When my wife drags me to the opera, as she does regularly, often as not, I'll have this in my pocket. Just, yeah. Another Toledo, but this is one that Pelikan never made. Some of you know the name Ariel Kulok. Ariel.
So speaking
Who's a
of
jeweler in
Pelikan never
Argentina?
made,
What?
speaking of Pelikan never made, Todd has spoken about Parker and how the people that worked in the plant would make one-off pens during lunch hours and things. Did
Oh, my
Pelikan people do
favorite
that?
one-off.
Did people at Pelikan do that much?
My
A
favorite
little?
one-off, and it's a little bit messy here because I don't take care of my pens the way most of you do. If you come up close, or if you've handled Pelikans, every single Pelikan ever made has a black section, except that one. It has a red hard rubber one. It was made by Pelikan. I mean, I've handled these things enough so that I know when something wasn't made in the factory by somebody else. This was made in the factory. Some guy just went, this is all wrong. We need a red hard rubber section. And so he made one. Yeah, I mean, everybody did lunchtime projects. I have another piece that I didn't bring tonight that those of you who were here last year saw, the M800, the original M800 from 1987. They made a fountain pen and they made a ballpoint. They did not make a pencil. I got one. This was made by my good friend, you guys who were at the show last month probably saw David Broadwell, the knife maker. He also, we got together and decided it would be fun to do bindas for Pelikans, so David did a Damascus.
Nice.
If we were gonna, I actually brought this for a purpose. If we were gonna do a repair segment, this is another Pelikan that no one ever, that Pelikan never made. It's a completely clear 100.
Wow.
Yeah, made in Poland last year. But it's exquisite, and I mean, it's fun. Couple.
Who was it?
Ain't saying. Couple of things that Pelikan did make, but never made it to market. light blue demonstrator. Those of you who are Pelikanistas know the dark blue, blue ocean.
Yeah.
This was probably a prototype for the Daedalus and Icarus,
Yep.
that lighter blue. They made a few pens. I don't know how many of these there are, but I got one.
Nice.
Gray
Rick,
smoke.
Rick,
Gray
the
smoke.
Athens is quite blue.
Yeah, yeah. We can do a little side by side. Smoke gray. Again, they were fiddling around. Another authorized, just like the Lauer.
CP6.
This is Andy Lambros. Was it CP6?
CP6.
CP6, the Marguerite and the whatever, after the Faustus stories. Great big honkin' pens on an 800 chassis and a 1000 chassis.
Say Grail pen right there.
No, I'll show you the Grail pen. I'm leaving that for last. Another Bandit. Around 2004 or so, the Italian distributors thought it would be fun to do some laser engraving on one of these things. So they did this laser engraving and went to Germany and said, look what we did. And Germany said, the German equivalent of the hell you did, and made them destroy what they hadn't sold. They're probably they made 100, about 30 some odd were sold. Just fun.
Yeah.
Back to Ariel. I think this is Ariel. I bought it, and then the next time I saw Ariel, I said, "Is this yours?" He said, "I don't remember. I think so." But a nice piece of silver engraving, kind of Ariel's work at his best. And then somebody said Grail pen, so for me, saving the best for last, my Grail pen.
Oh.
In 2004, Pelikan wanted to celebrate their 75th anniversary. And so they produced this, kind of the Ne Plus Ultra of their pens. It's the traditional shape. It's huge. It's heavy because all of this is 18 karat gold. It's got the Pelikan pinstripes, but in white and yellow. It's got that exhibition window, because everything has to have an exhibition window, right? With the filler, with its patent number. It's just a real cute pen. And initially when it came out, sort of cognitive dissonance, I went, oh, that's too expensive. I don't want one anyway. And then in 2005, I was at the Pelikan Archives, and Jürgen Dittmer, who's the Pelikan archivist, brought one out to show it to me, and it was all over. And they'd all been sold. And finally I found one in Italy. I don't think to this day my wife knows how much I paid for that. But, I paid it off after a couple of years. It's like a car, I mean, you don't expect to pay for it. But this kind of is, to me, the epitome. And it has a wonderful story behind it, because when I got it, it was flawed. There were cracks at the corners of the ink windows. I don't know why that happened or what. And so, the folks at Pelikan, I came to realize, knew who I was. I didn't realize that they did. But they knew who I was, and so when I wrote them, they said, yes, please send it to us. And then when you're here next time, you can pick it up. And so I got to walk into the factory with Herr Dittmer, the archivist, and the managing director came out and handed me my pen and took me through the factory. And if I didn't say that was a high point of my collecting life, I'd be more of a liar than I am.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's kind of the story. They have taken over my life. They've led me to places I never would have thought to have gone for just a lowly teacher who most of his time spent in lecture halls and grading papers with pens. At least until the end. At the end, I started doing them electronically. I'm ashamed to admit. You know, as someone pointed out, I think you pointed out, there really is no reason to write pens anymore these days. But every pen I sell, every pen I send out, goes with a handwritten note. And so that's kind of my story.
Rick, I've got one question for you. And
Yes,
always
sir.
talking about model numbers, I noticed that very few Pelicans have a model number on them. And almost every Mont Blanc, another German-made pen, almost every Mont Blanc does have a number on it. Why do Pelicans not say 100 someplace on it, 101, 140?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. The 140s,
120s.
actually, 120s and 140s do. Some of the
But why are they-
1970s
I mean, I'm
pens
thinking
do.
The Mont Blanc's been doing it since way before.
Yeah, and Mont Blanc never puts a nib grade on their pens, and Pelikan does sometimes.
Yeah. Is there any reason you know of for the Pelikan not doing that?
No,
No, okay,
no,
no insight, okay.
no insight.
That's fine.
I can tell you about the PF nibs if you want.
Alright, guys, thank you for joining us.
What's
We're
it-
done for the
There's been a
video.
lot of misinformation about that. There's some of the
No, I'm sorry, I'm making it longer, so how about the high, just the 1 minute, what's a PF nib?
It's got a custom stamp for Switzerland because they're outside the European Union.
Whoa.
That would be CH.
I have no idea what the PF stands for. At one point, my theory was that it denoted nibs that were made in-house. Pelikan sometimes make nibs in-house, sometimes they farm them out to Bach.